status of the town of Waukesha on-site sewage disposal system.
No.
Mr. Fisher?
And you all had an opportunity to look at the draft report that was put together by Chris Janelli from Wauk Milky. Oh, I guess if you're not, I guess I will simply characterize my takeaway on it, and that's simply that I think after almost 3 months' time spent and $2,700 spent, we're right in the place where I told all of you we were back at Halloween time. Our septic system is shot. That's my report.
The $2,700 comes from where?
Wauk Milky.
Have we seen a bill for it?
I have not,
Then how do we know it's $2,700?
because I asked Chris Janelli to give me an idea of how much time and money he had expended into it. That's why we know.
And how much of his time was spent doing this report? I mean, he's at about $100 an hour. So how do we get to $2,700? It looks like you did a lot of this work.
I did quite a bit of work. I'd suggest that you ask him, and I've been talking to him, you should probably ask him how he got to that number.
Well, since you managed this project and asked against some others' advice for him to be involved, because we were quite aware of what the issue was, how does his report differ from your report that you provided to us over the last 6 weeks?
I don't think it does.
Well, then why did you suggest that we go through the effort and the expense?
Because you wouldn't accept my word for it. In fact, you voted against it. It's real simple.
No, I voted against you providing a single person to review this, which was yourself. You refused to have anybody else involved, correct?
No, I made a motion to be the contact person, and it was approved 3-2 by the town board. That's it. Let's
And
move
I
ahead.
know
What
we're
would
not-
you like to do?
I would like to continue this discussion. Thank you. At the time that the motion was made to have an independent review, there was an amendment to the motion that asked that someone else be included in the process. You refused to accept that motion, is that correct? Remember that? You wanted to handle this solely. Can you acknowledge that you
Why
did?
don't you go back and listen to the tape of the meeting? The board voted 3-2 to approve my motion. I'm not going to discuss it any further.
Okay, well, I'll just read it into the record that you
Could we have the
refused to.
minutes? Could we have somebody give the minutes? Because this is ridiculous, you two talking and fighting back and
Ms.
forth.
Fuller, please, no discussion from the floor. Okay. I do have, the time that we spend here is to learn the information that we need to learn. And you've prepared a report along with Mr. Janelli that indicates that for $2,700 now that this project has failed. Is that your statement?
I would suggest you read Mr. Janelli's report.
Just answer the question, Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Janelli's report speaks for itself.
Okay,
Angie.
let's just assume, so you stand fully behind Mr. Janelli's report as complete?
No, it's not complete because I sent 2 emails in the past week to Clerk Salentine asking her to provide the invoices from Stanley Walter for pumping the septic tank to Mr. Janelli, and he's still waiting for him, so it's incomplete.
But effectively, the recommendations that he's making, which are the alternatives of the septic replacement, the holding tank, and the city sewer service, are in keeping with your thought process and what the 3 options are for the town of Waukesha. Is that correct?
I don't disagree with that at all. That's
Okay.
correct.
And that's from your professional background as well?
It absolutely is.
Okay. And you were the town's architect and engineer of this building for a number of years?
I was the architect and engineer for this very addition, and we're sitting on the other end of the building. That is correct.
And you also made application to the Waukesha County septic system review when necessary during those additions?
I don't recall the details, but all of the necessary and appropriate plan approvals were made and received.
Did you engage Mr. Wayne Pett to speak on the behalf of the town of Waukesha?
No, I did not.
You know Mr. Wayne Pett?
I do?
And did you tell me in a previous meeting that you had asked Mr. Pett to talk to Waukesha County on our behalf?
No, I did not tell you that. I told you that I asked him as a professional courtesy, at no obligation to the town, to stop by and look at that device that's called a dry well or leaching cesspool. He did that as a professional courtesy. He indicated it in conversation. He might touch base with Waukesha County, and I didn't prohibit him from doing it.
Well, Mr. Wayne Pett had a discussion with Mike Radomski of the county environmental health, and he manages that a year ago, according to Mr. Radomski, and had some significant concerns about how the system is built here and the needs of that system. This goes back a year. On Tuesday, the 15th, the system needed to be pumped, and I was, as part of my duties, needed to respond to if a PO could be issued to have that pumped. And knowing that you had engaged as part of your process, Hair Environmental, I recommended that Hair Environmental be called and they pump the system so that they would have a further familiarity with it, especially if they were going to do additional work. I was at the town hall when Hair Environmental came on Tuesday the 15th, and one of their principals, Michael Hare, was in attendance and joined his pumper so that he could take a look at the system. On the 16th, a draft report of what you provided to us was sent to you from Chris in Word format, which is highly unusual. Typically, all reports from Rupert and Milky come directly to the town clerk on their letterhead with their signature. That's not how that report was sent to you. It was sent solely to you with a comment, basically, is this what you want? Let's get together and work on this. I don't consider that an independent report, and please let me finish. So here's my concern, which I respected the fact that to settle the issue, we should have someone professional come and look at the facility. I don't know why it cost $2,700, and we'll look at Mr. Chimmerly's work for that. But what I learned in talking to Mr. Radomski when I went to get the file, so that our file could be complete, so things could be sent to Chris Janelli, is that there's been discussion about the need to have a separate holding tank for the waters that are coming from the catch basin, both in the DPW building and in the fire department. Are you familiar with that discussion?
I'm not, no.
You're not familiar with the need that there needs to be a separate holding tank for those hazardous materials that could come off of that?
No, there does not need to be.
Okay.
That is, I will tell you, as long as you ask the question on that,
Yep.
that has been a discussion long in making between people at the plumbing officials in Madison and the DNR people. And basically, if you have a repair garage, historically that has been an appropriate thing to do. We do not have a repair garage here, and that has not been in the past an appropriate or necessary thing to do.
Well, both Mike Radomski, in speaking to Wayne Pett, which was speaking on behalf of the town of Waukesha, and Michael Hare, who was here, both indicated that they were directed to find a way to separate the waters so that the existing catch basins in the DPW and in the fire department could be split. And to have both of those independent men who hadn't spoken to each other on 2 days in a row, over at least a year's time of discussion, to indicate that we were not in compliance here gives me great concern. And now to have you indicate that that is not even in this report that needs to be done. And my understanding is this is a health and safety issue. The reason that those waters are not to go into the septic system is because the leaching system goes into the groundwater and affects well water. And I would assume that that is why there was discussion as to how that would be split. So I am concerned as to this report, the fact that discussion has been had with Michael Hare, who, as you've indicated, is part of this process, who is completely focused on the fact that we need to split those up and have a separate holding tank, yet there is nothing in this report that even speaks to that. I don't understand how this is an independent report, and I don't understand why for $2,700, we're not protecting the health and safety of the people here. And perhaps that's why there's bottled water here, because those waters have been going in there for a period of time and haven't been split. And I'm really concerned that that hasn't been brought to our attention over the, 6 times that this has been on our agenda, and you're obviously aware that it's a concern, or these folks wouldn't know about it. How else do you explain that they're focused on this?
I guess I'll answer your question, Angie. It's shot. I told you that on November 12th when you called me. It's shot. It's been here for 54 years. If you read the report, water in the dry well percolates into the soil at the rate of 1/32 of an inch per hour. It drops an inch a day. I, in fact, had the pleasure of talking to former town Chairman John Brunner. Some of you might not know that name, but he was town chairman here back in the 1990s. Give him a phone call. He will tell you it was problematic then. It has been for years. You can't get off of this issue. You wrote a nasty email to the fire department and everybody accused him of damaging and sabotaging the system. That is way over the top. You have the report from Chris Janelli. I did talk to him. You didn't want him to be here tonight. Don't make an inquisition of me. Have him here at the next meeting and ask him your own questions. I'm finished.
Well, I would imagine you are finished.
You bet.
You bet. Because part of the problem is in the documents in the file, it indicates that we are to be expanding that septic system over the time when you were overseeing the projects here. Yes, it absolutely does, and I'm happy to show it to you. I mean, the fact is, when any other homeowner expands their home, adds a bedroom and a bathroom, that the building inspection department, before there's a permit, they are needing to review and increase the size of their septic field. And you're directed in some of the paperwork that's at the county offices that has your name on it, that should have been done. And we've had, 4 expansions here, and now you're telling me that John Brenner has said in the 90s it was already failing, and we've continued to add laundry facilities, shower facilities, bathrooms, with no expansion or even understanding what the septic system was out there. That has caused potentially a health hazard. And yes, is it failed? My goodness, why wouldn't it be? It was built for a tiny little building in the 1950s. Why wasn't that addressed over time?
So you are now accepting the reality that it's failed, because that is a major bit of progress.
No, Mr. Fisher, it's not a major bit of progress, okay?
It is. I mean, I'm ready to jump a jumping jacks in front of everybody. If you're finally ready to acknowledge that it's shot. Why are you cartwheels across the room?
Well, I would imagine you'd like to deflect the fact, why wasn't this addressed over time? The cost to the town is going to be significantly more than what you've described and what has been developed for us. And Chris Janelli, did you want him here tonight to sit at his rate through the entire time so that he could now be here? And the problem is the cost to us, as I understand it from Hair Environmental, and they are people that you've engaged, right, to do this, is our...
I did not engage Hair Environmental.
Then who did?
If anybody engaged him, it was Chris Janelli.
Okay, so
let me
never...
just tell you, Angie, you can make a decision tonight. Let me discuss. I'm done with it. You can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. You can make up your own mind.
I'm trying to be part of a solution that fully understands the commitment that we have. Hair Environmental has indicated that the majority of the cost to this correction is going to take place by the splitting of the water between the fire department and the DPW, because it was not done at the time that those buildings were built. And this report does not include any of that information. So if this is a complete report, I'm very concerned we need to have additional work done here.
Then talk to Chris Janelli about his report. That's why we hired a professional to do it. If you don't like his report, you talked to him last week. I'm assuming you told him you didn't like his report.
I didn't ask him any questions about his report. I said,
him, not me.
why not? You're managing, and you insisted on managing this process on your own, Mr. Fisher.
I agreed to be the contact to give him information. He wrote the report. It is his report. So talk to him.
So if there's a failure, did you not tell me in conversation that Chris Janelli and their firm was not the group that you wanted done because they no longer have expertise in this area and you were looking to have someone else take over?
He said to the extent he needed it and you endorsed it, he talked to Hair Environmental. He told me somebody by the name of Debbie. I don't know who that is, and I believe they concurred. Ask him that it is shot. Ask him these questions and stop your inquisition of me.
May I speak?
Huh?
I'd like to jump in. For one thing, years ago, any drainage out of a building, per se, the fire department or public works, was ran outside into the parking lot or into the field. At some point, they decided to put it into the system. That was state. Now, the state has gone back the other way, it can be ran outside. If this system had been expanded 10 years ago, it probably would have been shot 5 years ago. We wouldn't be sitting here arguing tonight. It needs to be repaired or replaced, period. No fault of anybody.
The system does not simply need to be replaced. We need to run that water separately, and there's obviously been discussion between someone, which would include Chris, I'm assuming, and includes Hair, or they wouldn't be talking about it, and that's not included in the report, and I'd like to understand why.
Then ask him why.
Okay?
Well,
I didn't write the report.
I took it upon myself to actually call Chris today,
Okay.
and I asked him, for full disclosure, I grew up in the city, I don't know much about septic. So I went and said, hey, Chris, what can you tell me about this? And there was some comments about whether or not a fire department is required to have the water from their floor drains and the DPW run into a holding tank. And he said his report kind of mentions that that's one option to fix the solution. He pointed out the best option is to potentially hook up onto the city, because then that's obviously a done repair and we'll never likely have to address that again. I will say I am concerned and would have liked to have known that you, Brian, that you were involved with the additions, and that I didn't know that. And, you know, I'm concerned about the $2,700. I don't know where Chris comes up with that number, given that the DPW was putting down the stick and taking the measurements and sending them in. That's included in your report. The pictures of the system were the ones that you provided to them. So I'm concerned about that cost, because it seems like if he's $100 an hour, how in the world did he get that? And we could go back and forth about, you know, you were managing the project and all of that, but in the big picture of things, it is $2,700 of a $3 million budget, and I don't want to be, you know, berate that point much longer, but clearly this thing needs to be fixed. It's 50 years old. Something needs to be done. I mean, I for one would like to, if Rupert Milky, as I understand it, doesn't really do this work, that they've subcontracted it in some fashion out to Hair Environmental. We now have the middleman involved here. We should be cutting them out. We should get, you said his name is Michael Hair. He should be front and center. He should, you know, if this was my house, I'd be looking at the guy and saying, hey, what am I supposed to do to fix my house? He would probably tell me. I don't dare believe he'd charge me $2,700 to tell me that my septic is broken and what to do to fix it. But we should be looking at the options to fix, and whether or not, as Chris pointed out to me today, the real expense here, and Andrew, I think you said this as well, is separating the system by taking DPW and fire off of the main sewer line kind of thing. If that's what we have to do, better start getting some bids and getting some numbers, and let's start by getting Hair in here to share the information with all of us, get the details of it, and, you know, let's remove the fingerprint of you're involved and you were involved before and the back and forth. Let's get Hair in here, let's get Rupert and Milky out of the picture, and these guys are probably gonna be the ones that do the work anyway, right, Hair? I mean, No, let me answer a couple of questions. First of all, and we don't have minutes here tonight, that's obvious, but if you go back and listen to the tape recording, and maybe somebody who's got a good memory here, chairperson asked me at the previous meeting what I thought the services of Brookert and Milky might cost for the assignment. Does anybody remember that? And what did I say? $2,500. Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. You get an A+ and a gold star this evening. Thank you very much. $2,500. If you want to sit here and argue until midnight, until 27 or $2,500, I would be happy to do it. $2,700 is 1% of what we're paying for attorney's fees this year. Get real. Get real, folks, okay? I will tell you, I asked Chris Janelli because I'm concerned as well about the amount of money. And a fair amount of that is my work product. It's factual, but to save the town money. I asked him to tell me verbally how much expense he had into this. That's not an exact number. I asked him how much of it was Hare's, and he said he didn't even think he was going to get a bill from them because he talked to Debbie. This is such a no-brainer. The thing is shot. And Hare Environmental, if we're looking seriously at connecting to the municipal sanitary sewer system, which is probably the best option we could pursue, Hare is not the wrong thing. That's like trying to go get a podiatrist for heart surgery.
Joe, I didn't ask this question of Chris because I didn't have an in-depth conversation. Did he acknowledge that we needed to split those waters and there would need to be a separate holding tank for the water that comes out of the DPW and the fire department?
His representation to me was that it is a debatable item, that he presented that exact question to county officials. This happened in one conversation, he said. That he asked the question and they said, absolutely, you have to split those. Then he asked the question, same question, different words as he described it, and then he was told, well, that might be okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Bansky. Let me just tell you, if we hook up to the municipal sanitary sewer, which is probably the best option, you can forget the discussion about separation. You don't need the holding tank.
And I hear you, but in order for us to hook up to the sewer, we all agree we've got to go ask the city for that and get approved.
Yeah, gee, you think?
Well, yes. So to say that we could just put all of our eggs in one basket and we don't go ask Hare to start getting those price numbers and understand really what we have there is putting a gun to our own head. So we need to go find out what these other options are. There, you know, as Chris put in the drawings here, there is an option to put in a new septic field that eats up a large portion of the grass behind the DPW. Chris represented to me this evening that he felt that the larger system could handle everything, and he felt that there'd be, and again, I don't know what his expertise is, I'm telling you what the man said to me. He felt that he could find a way to, you know, because the fire department is supposed to be using, you know, biodegradable soap when they wash the trucks, and they're not supposed to change the oil or flush the coolant. There's like a laundry list of things that they cannot do and that the public works can't do. I don't know that they're not doing those here, which would be a potential violation, but I mean, you mentioned that there's supposed to be some crazy signs up here in the town hall that tell us the things that we can't do. I don't see any signs anywhere that tell you that you can't, you know, flush certain things down the drain and so on and so forth. But, you know, those would be restrictions that we would have if we went to having a septic similar to what he provided on the drawings. Or we go to a holding tank and then the fire department and the DPW can change the oil, flush the coolant, and do whatever else they do. And we wouldn't have a concern about that.
Well, not exactly. Those materials that go through the catch basin actually have to be handled separately. And that water cannot go into the septic system, and that cannot be pumped the same way. It has to be handled separately. And I'm not even convinced that even if we go to the city, that we may not have a separation. because, you know, oils and contaminants of those kinds are not supposed to go into the city process. So, you know, if we've spent $2,700 and we don't have a clear picture of what we need to do here, I don't think that was successful. I fully support having Hare here, and since I've had the opportunity to meet him and Mr. Fisher would like me to make that call from what I understood him to say, we will have him do a report and provide the information regarding that he's provided. We'll get a definitive answer and move this thing forward. All right, any further discussion? Yes, Mr.
With the time it takes for that leaching cesspool to drop, if we took everything offline and only had the restroom facilities going into that tank, when that tank filled up and overflowed into the leaching cesspool, you flush the toilet 3 times, it's gonna back up. It's not draining out of that system, period. I don't care what we put into it. What goes into it is not draining.
But Mr. German, just like Mr. Fisher has indicated, this system has been undersized probably since the 1950s. We've added to this building umpteen times without addressing it. And quite frankly, it has backed up twice in 2 years. If you go home and you have Maureen do every load of laundry that she can possibly do, and you flush every toilet and you run every shower, you may have a problem with your septic system too. There's only so much water it can take at one point in time. And there are times during the course of the year here when the fire department does need to use water. They had a big fire 2 weeks ago. They had to wash the trucks. They had to wash the hoses. All that water went at one time into the system. They have a lot of laundry to do. So there are times, but if we handle it well, as they have for many years here, we can't allow that system to continue. If there is a definite issue that we want that to be replaced and spend $30 or $40 or $50,000, which is what these reports indicate, fine. But our forefathers found ways to manage the system without having to do that. And quite frankly, this should have been updated and upgraded years ago so we didn't have this expense now. So we will get the dollars, we'll figure out what it is, we'll put it into the budget, because you know what? We're going to need a budget amendment for this one.
When I was a child, we went out in the backyard and dug a hole, we called it an outhouse. And it worked. At some point, we had to move it. That system, the leaching cess, is saturated and plugged, period.
There's
The
a lot.
way to handle this is have the county come out and do a perk test on that area and see how the water drains.
The county doesn't do a perk test, you have to hire a separate company.
And
that Jared can hire.
respectfully, you
Yes.
gotta get a grip on reality.
Okay.
Just listen, that thing, right now, we have monitored it. I can put it up on the screen if you wanna see. It's in the report. It basically will allow about 25 gallons per day to percolate into the soil at its best performance. The potties back there, folks, are about 2.5 gallons of flush. So if 10 of you went potty tonight, you basically overloaded our system. Get a grip on reality.
Do you have a final word now?
I don't know what else you can say in response to that. You can deny that the sun comes up in the east if you want, but you ain't gonna get us anyplace.
Mr. Fisher, I simply want a report that properly indicates what our expenses are going to be and what we're going to need to do. So quit trying to divert from everything else. We do have an issue. It's been a long-standing issue that should have been addressed. Let's address it. But let's at least have a report that we know what needs to be done.
Well,
Are we done?
you can take over from here and do whatever you darn well please.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's move on. Attorney Bucher, correspondence and reply. As I asked to put on,